5 decades. Over 30 directorial credits. Billions of dollars at the global box office. Steven Spielberg has worked with virtually every major acting talent Hollywood has ever produced. So when a filmmaker of that stature quietly reveals which 6 performers genuinely moved him, not just professionally, but personally, the world pays attention. And the list is not what you'd expect. Some names on it will feel obvious in hindsight. Others will genuinely surprise you. One of them made Spielberg so nervous that he openly admitted to feeling intimidated on his own set. Another one made him stop working on one of cinema's greatest films just to grieve. And one of them, the one perhaps closest to his heart, never even made a second film with him. These aren't just Spielberg's most successful collaborators. These are the 6 performers who reached past the camera and changed the way he understood storytelling itself. So who made the list? Let's find out. But before we do, if you love cinema and the stories behind the greatest filmmakers alive, hit that like button right now, share this with a fellow film lover, subscribe so you never miss another deep dive like this one, and drop a comment below telling us who your personal favorite Spielberg actor is. We read every single one. Now, let's get into it. When you think of Steven Spielberg, it's almost impossible not to think of Harrison Ford. The two men built one of cinema's most celebrated creative partnerships across 4 Indiana Jones films, a collaboration that began in 1981 with Raiders of the Lost Ark and fundamentally rewrote the rules of the adventure genre. But what Spielberg has said about Ford goes well beyond box office admiration. For Spielberg, Ford embodies something rare in the modern film industry, an actor who brings absolute believability without ever appearing to try. His Indiana Jones wasn't a superhero. He was a man who got hurt, got tired, and kept going anyway. That grounded quality, that refusal to lean on spectacle, is precisely what made audiences love him, and precisely what Spielberg treasures most. Ford's dedication to physical authenticity on set was legendary. He insisted on performing demanding sequences himself, not out of recklessness, but out of a deep professional commitment to keeping the audience inside the story. The moment a stunt feels fake, the emotional connection breaks. Ford understood that instinctively. Spielberg has described Ford as someone whose confidence transforms the atmosphere of an entire production. When Ford walks onto a set, things settle. The energy sharpens. And when the camera rolls, that quiet authority translates directly to the screen. He never chases the spotlight, never plays the politics of celebrity. He shows up, does the work with total commitment, and trusts the film to carry the rest. In an industry built on noise, Harrison Ford's greatest gift has always been his stillness. If Harrison Ford represents reliability, Daniel Day-Lewis represents something altogether more mysterious, a kind of total artistic transformation that left even Spielberg, a director of immense confidence, openly humbled. Their collaboration on Lincoln in 2012 is the stuff of filmmaking legend. Day-Lewis didn't simply prepare for the role of Abraham Lincoln. He inhabited it so completely that Spielberg reportedly addressed him as Mr. President throughout the entire production, not as an affectation, but because breaking that boundary felt genuinely disrespectful to the work being done. Spielberg has spoken candidly about the experience of directing Day-Lewis, admitting that his usual role as the guide and shaper of performance became almost irrelevant. What Day-Lewis brought to set each morning didn't need redirecting. It needed witnessing. Spielberg described the experience as being granted a form of time travel, watching history breathe inside a living performance. The result was Day-Lewis's 3rd Academy Award for Best Actor, cementing a legacy that most serious film observers regard as unmatched in modern cinema. But for Spielberg, the award was almost beside the point. What stayed with him was the lesson embedded in the collaboration, that occasionally, the bravest thing a director can do is simply step aside and let a performer find the truth without interference. Day-Lewis has since retired from acting. which means Lincoln may stand permanently as the monument to what these two extraordinary artists built together. If there is one performer whose name is most consistently linked with Spielberg's creative identity, it is Tom Hanks. Their partnership stretches across 5 films: Saving Private Ryan, Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, and The Post, and represents one of the most sustained and productive director-actor relationships in Hollywood history. What makes the Spielberg-Hanks dynamic so enduring is the quality of trust embedded within it. Hanks has said publicly that when Spielberg calls, he doesn't need to hear the details of the project before saying yes. That level of mutual faith doesn't develop through professional convenience. It's built scene by scene, film by film, over years of shared creative risk. Spielberg values Hanks because of what he does to the emotional architecture of a film. He doesn't overwhelm scenes, he anchors them. Whether he's portraying a World War II captain leading men through one of cinema's most harrowing combat sequences, or a man quietly stranded in an airport terminal navigating bureaucratic absurdity, Hanks locates the precise emotional frequency required and holds it steady for the audience. Spielberg has described the experience of directing him as one of calibration rather than instruction. Small cues, subtle adjustments, an almost wordless shorthand developed through years of working in close creative proximity. For a filmmaker who operates as intuitively as Spielberg does, having an actor who communicates on that same instinctive level is invaluable beyond measure. Tom Hanks isn't just Spielberg's most frequent collaborator. He may be his most trusted one. Here's one that surprises people. Spielberg and Leonardo DiCaprio have only collaborated once, on the 2002 film Catch Me If You Can, and yet Spielberg has consistently named DiCaprio among the performers who impressed him most deeply. When DiCaprio was cast as real-life con artist Frank Abagnale Jr., he was coming off the global phenomenon of Titanic and carrying the weight of enormous public expectation. Many directors would have been tempted to lean into that stardom, to let the audience's existing affection for DiCaprio do some of the narrative heavy lifting. Spielberg did the opposite. He pushed DiCaprio toward the emotional fracture beneath the surface charm. Frank Abagnale wasn't just a brilliant impersonator. He was a young man running from grief and abandonment, constructing elaborate identities because his real one felt unbearable. Getting that subtext right required an actor capable of extraordinary interior work. DiCaprio delivered it. Spielberg later described watching DiCaprio work as observing someone with an almost mechanical internal clock. Every beat landed with precision. Every emotional shift arrived exactly when the scene demanded it. For a filmmaker as rhythmically precise as Spielberg, that quality is enormously attractive in a performer. The two have never made another film together, though discussions over the years have touched on various projects that never ultimately came to fruition. But Spielberg has made clear that the door is open. When the right story arrives, he believes their best collaboration may still be ahead of them. Steven Spielberg had admired Meryl Streep for the better part of 4 decades before he finally directed her. When the opportunity came with The Post in 2017, he has openly admitted he was nervous, a remarkable confession from a filmmaker whose career spans some of the most technically and emotionally demanding productions in cinema history. Streep arrived on set as Katharine Graham, the Washington Post publisher who made one of the most consequential decisions in American press history, and she brought with her a precision that Spielberg found genuinely awe-inspiring. Every gesture was considered. Every silence was loaded with intention. She didn't perform emotion. She constructed it from the inside out, and then allowed it to surface with total control. Spielberg has described the experience of directing Streep as conducting a symphony in which the lead instrument already knows the music perfectly. His role shifted from instructor to collaborator, trusting her instincts absolutely while shaping the broader visual and narrative frame around what she brought to each scene. The performance earned Streep her 21st Academy Award nomination, a record that speaks for itself. But what Spielberg carries from the experience isn't the accolade. It's the memory of watching genuine mastery at work, up close, on a subject, journalism, courage, institutional power, that he cared about deeply. And then there is Robin Williams. Of all 6 names on this list, his is perhaps the one that tells us the most about Steven Spielberg, the human being, rather than Spielberg, the filmmaker. Hook, released in 1991, was by Spielberg's own admission one of the most chaotic and difficult productions of his career. The scale was overwhelming. The schedule collapsed repeatedly. And Spielberg, a director who depends on control and preparation, found himself genuinely struggling. Robin Williams was not the solution to a logistical problem. He was something far more important. He was a source of joy in a production that had run dangerously short of it. Every evening after filming wrapped, Williams would call Spielberg, not to discuss the next day's scenes, not to solve production challenges, but simply to make him laugh. 15 minutes of pure, generous, unscripted comedy, offered freely by a man who understood intuitively that his director needed to remember why he loved making films. Spielberg has never forgotten that. When Williams died in August 2014, Spielberg spoke about the loss with a grief that went well beyond the professional. He revealed that he had paused work during the production of Schindler's List to simply sit with the sadness of losing someone who had given him back his own sense of wonder at a moment when he desperately needed it. Williams and Spielberg never made another film together. They didn't need to. One collaboration, one friendship, was sufficient to leave a permanent mark. What strikes you, looking at this list as a whole, is what these 6 performers share beneath their obvious differences in style, temperament, and approach. Every one of them gave Spielberg something he couldn't manufacture on his own: truth. Ford's physical authenticity. Day-Lewis's historical presence. Hanks's emotional steadiness. DiCaprio's interior precision. Streep's architectural control. And Williams's irreplaceable, unrepeatable aliveness. Great filmmaking has never been a solo act. And Spielberg, perhaps more honestly than most directors of his stature, has always been willing to say so. Which of these 6 performances resonates most with you? Is there a Spielberg collaboration we didn't mention that deserves to be in this conversation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely want to know where you stand. If this story moved you even a little, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves great cinema, and subscribe so you're first in line when we publish our next story. The next video is already on your screen, and it is absolutely worth your time.